I'm gonna start recording now.
Are we good?
Hold on.
This meeting is being recorded.
I guess I can go virtual. For like 3 days of school.
All right, you're live.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call this meeting to order of the Mayor and Board of Commissioners for June 8th, 2021. Can I get the roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Braun,
Here.
Commissioner Warnick,
Here.
Commissioner Pearson,
Here.
Commissioner Shepard, Mayor Marion.
Here.
Let the record show you do have a quorum.
Will you rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I want to go ahead and have a brief moment of silence for Norman Juggler, who recently passed away. Norman and his son, Rob Juggler, have done a lot of different projects for the town of Rethington over the years. Our thoughts and our prayers are with him and his family. So please have a moment of silence. Thank you. All right, public presentations. I think we can skip over how the town meeting format works.
Yes, that is
Under
correct.
business meeting items, budget discussion, town administrator, do you have that?
Yes, I do. So can everybody hear me? The elected
Yeah.
body can hear me? Unfortunately, this monitor blocks me here. So the first thing I'm going to do is share my screen. Okay, so what we're doing here tonight is taking a look at our budget for the next upcoming year. We have changed the format around ever so slightly because one of the things we have been doing over the years is incorporating, first of all, bringing the town accounting back into town hall, and we have Judy Melton has basically been managing that as the town treasurer. We have some really good software programs here now that give us a lot of flexibility and resources to track a lot of things. So this year we sort of blended the budget that you were used to seeing in the past, the Excel spreadsheets and all the colored charts, into something that is more or less coming out of the MIP software program. So it actually is making the budget process a lot easier. And so the format looks a little bit the same, but it is slightly different. So just to go over here, the elected body, you have, like we've done in the past, you have a line number on the left-hand side. So if you have a specific question about an item, you could just ask me the line number, and then the budget is broken into the type of account it is, if it's revenue or if it's expense. The account title is basically what the title is for the account item. This is what the budget was for last year in all of these individual accounts. This is what we have collected year to date so far in those budgeted accounts. This is the variance over what we budgeted for and what is actually come in or has been expended. And then we prorate that over a 12-month period to tell you that based upon what we've collected or spent so far, what it should be at the end of June 30th. And the numbers that you have tonight are all the numbers up through May 31st, Judy?
May 31st.
Yes. So you have 11 months worth of data driving the data that you're looking at. And then in column I here under proposed budget that's the number that we're focusing on. So before we get into the bits and pieces, of it, because unless there are questions, there isn't a whole lot of detail that's different from what you've seen in the past. COVID put a lot of stress on everybody in the past year, and we got very aggressive about dampening down the revenue projections, dampening down the proposed expenses. That way, we had no idea what COVID was going to be when we came out the other side, and we just wanted to make sure that financially we weren't in ruins, quite frankly. I've talked about this every time we do the budget. We're not like a lot of communities that are able to balance the budgets with large sums of money at the end of the year. I go back to what I always say, just like your household, you should have rainy day funds set aside. From a business standpoint, depends upon who you talk to, you should either have 6 months of expenses, a year of expenses, or a year and a half worth of expenses. We're not to that point yet. We're trying to build up our reserve funds to be able to have ample emergency funds. We're getting there, and this year's budget is looking pretty good. So let me tell you, based upon what the individual department heads and the elected body in terms of, in their respective departments talking about what they want, this budget, from a staffing standpoint, includes adding a 5th Public Works employee in there. So it would bring the available manpower under normal circumstances. We have 4 members in our Public Works department. Because of COVID, we reduced that down to 3 members in our Public Works department. And as we can all appreciate, that can make it very difficult for our public works crews to be able to do certain things. For instance, if you're fixing a pothole, you at the very least many times need 2 people to control the traffic. So normally you'd like to have 2, if not more, actually doing the work, driving the trucks, running the backhoe, whatever. We've been operating for a year now with only 3 such employees. So we're understaffed. We definitely want to get back to 4, but we've been talking about going to 5 because we just want more flexibility to save money by not paying contractors to do as much work as they have done in the past, and bring that work in-house and have it covered by what I like to call our 9-to-5 employees, meaning you're paying them for a day's work anyway. Why not have them do more, expand upon what they're capable of doing? So this budget includes filling the vacant 4th position and adding a 5th position. In the police department, we are operating with 2 vacancies in the police department right now. The police department is in the same situation. We have a large amount of overtime that's being paid in order to maintain adequate public safety and police presence. So we are 2 positions short. This budget includes those 2, filling those 2 positions. The other thing that the chief has been talking about is right now it is becoming very difficult to fill vacant police officer positions for a variety of reasons. One of the most predominant ones, I guess, is the stigmatism, I guess, of whether or not people want to get involved in law enforcement at a time right now where society is trying to figure out exactly what the role of law enforcement is supposed to be, or what they would like it to be. So all departments are struggling to fill vacant positions. But on top of that, we have an issue where historically the town has been a little bit behind what the starting salaries are for police officers, which means that if the county sheriff's office and the state police are essentially fishing out of the same pond that we are fishing out of, and then communities such as Perryville and Northeast and Elkton, they're fishing out of the same pond, when you don't have a whole lot of recruits to begin with, if you're not competitive in what you're offering, you're going to have a hard time filling the position, or you might be filling the position with people that or individuals that are not able to meet the expectations. So what we have done is we have raised the starting salary. It was previously 39,000 and change was the starting salary. We've now moved it up to $45,000 in starting salary and change. In addition to that, in order to make the sustainability of good police officers, we are adjusting the base salary of all the officers by 5%. So across the board, we are making it more attractive to be a law enforcement officer in the town of Rising Sun. And hopefully we can sort of pick through the cream of the crop of good candidates, so to speak. So we're putting ourselves in a position to be more competitive, be more attractive, and then in turn fill the positions with better employees, employees that have more potential to sustain the expectations. The other area is that we've been talking for a long time about the need for a code enforcement officer. We've carried this in the budget for probably the last 6 or 7 years, but we've never quite pulled the trigger on that because the timing just hasn't been right. We are now to the point where the timing is right because we are no longer in a water and sewer moratorium, and just over the past year alone, we've had 5 new houses built in town, and just for from a layman's standpoint, those 5 houses all generate about 7 individual inspections apiece. So you're looking at like 35 more inspections alone just in bringing or having 5 new houses built. Not to mention the fact that we're still chasing down vacant properties. We still get a lot of complaints about high grass, and we're not quite as proactive as we would like to be because we just don't have the manpower to do it. So we are carrying in the budget the position for a code enforcement officer. The other thing that we have in the budget is street repaving, and I'm going to potentially talk more about that in my town administrator's report, but we have put out the bid for about $950,000 worth of street repaving. If you've heard me talk about it at other meetings, that requires us to generate new money, meaning new money that has to be reoccurring on a yearly basis. These are not one-time expenses. So when you hire new employees or take on projects that require financing over a period of time, you got to have a business plan that will sustain that expense demand. So we are looking to do about $950,000 worth of paving. It has been put out to bid. We expect to open those bids on June 23rd, come back to the elected body at the last meeting, at the next meeting to get the board to ratify it, and then the contractors would start hopefully immediately. Now, the reason why I put the caveat on there, and I know that it is frustrating to everyone, but if you just saw today, President Biden is, the federal government is finally starting to address the logjam of the supply chain that's happening in several industries, with construction industry being primary number one. Blacktop is at a premium right now. Trying to get blacktop volume is very difficult. Materials, employment. So our expectation is to come out of the chute running in July early July and start immediately with the paving of Valley View and the reconstruction down there, along with a couple other roads. But again, the one thing that's out of our control is any kind of log jams in the construction industry. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that once the bids are awarded, that we'll be ready to jump out of the gate right away. To put it into context, though, I think that when we are done this last trunket of $950,000 of paving, we will have essentially repaved over the last 10 years or so just about every town road that we own in town. Again, we're not responsible for county roads and state highways, but we're right on the verge here of being ahead of the curve. We have always financed our roads with the idea that the paving lasts for 10 years. We do have a couple projects that we had to go back and redo. One to bring to your attention is Mason Run, or the Summer Hill development. And we all know that we were extremely frustrated about the way Summer Hill was built originally, which led to the roads to the decay almost immediately after the development was done, and we're still working upon that base to some degree. So although we only paved Summer Hill, a short time ago, we're right back into having to pave it again. So hopefully we will be turning the corner here very soon, where we don't have to have a year necessarily, or successive years of having to do repaving in there. The other thing that's in our budget is what I talked about, is the stormwater management requirements. That again is the unfunded mandate that we have for stormwater management. We have our annual report that we have to do that always costs us about a good $35,000 to do all the reports. If anyone who attended Sunfest saw that we put the display table out, that is a brand new display table for stormwater management. We have a responsibility to do public outreach 4 times a year, so that's going to be something new, although there's not a big ticket item to it. It's just one of the many examples of what we now have to be taking on. So we have to do our next annual report, or this annual report. It cost us about $27,000 to do that on an annual basis. So that is in there. But if you also remember a couple meetings ago, when we talked about having to reduce the town's 20% footprint, as I like to call it, of bad stuff that gets into the waterways, we're required over a 5-year period to reduce that impact by 20%. And we do that by rebuilding or redoing streams, planting trees. We get some credits for repair and upgrades to some stormwater management features that are already in place. But the cheapest one that we're looking at between now and 2025 is a $1.8 million expense to bring the town into compliance by 2025 by reducing our footprint by 20%. As I've said before, that's an unfunded mandate. We haven't really addressed how we're going to fund that yet. We're trying to get a 5-year head start on that. There's really nothing in this year's budget that's necessarily laying away the funds to start doing that. And I believe that that requires us to generate about $485,000 a year over the next 5 years or so to get up to the amount of money that we need. However, a lot of the legwork that is going to be needed to complete our requirements by 2025 are not going to change. So our budget is going to include roughly a $69,000 expenditure to get moving on the design and what we are doing. And the reason why we are doing that is I professionally believe that as small towns especially are facing these unfunded mandates, the federal government and the state is going to have to step up and start providing funding avenues for communities. And it's much better to come and show that you're being responsible and you're making an effort and have a plan in place instead of acting like, you ignored it for 5 years. So what we're trying to do is spend the $69,000 now that's going to have to be done anyway, so that when a funding opportunity comes up, we can really put ourselves at the front of the line by having all the engineering and stuff ready to go when it comes time to actually execute it. So once again, we're trying to position the town to be upfront on that. All of our funds, we've done a lot in community outreach over the last couple of years with the senior banners and Winterfest and Fall Fest and Sunfest, and all the things we are doing are very beneficial for generating energy in the community. In other words, people feel good about the community they live in because it has a small town community feel and it feels like a community. So we are investing money in Little League and the high school and supporting the kid activities. We're doing what we can to put money out to essentially put families first to some degree and be able to make it a more robust and enjoyable community to be a part of. So we still have adequate funding in all those areas to continue to do that. Now, there's another area, and I'm sorry, there's also, we budgeted for one new police car, and we've also budgeted and will be budgeting for replacement of the dump trailer in the Public Works Department. The dump trailer, obviously by its name, we use it a lot. It's what we use to collect yard waste, and we've been holding it together by gum and chicken wire for a while now, and it's just becoming too costly to keep it on the road. So we do have in our budget to replace the dump trailer, and as I said, in addition, to replace one of our police cars, to purchase a police car. The other thing that I want to bring up is that we're in a pretty good position here. And so what I'd like to do is, if you scroll down the pages that you have in front of you, or flip the pages, you can see how the general admin is set up. And remember, we have, I believe, like 8 departments that make up the general fund. And some of those departments have their own expenses, and some of the expenses are shared by other departments. So at the bottom of each one of the funds or the departments, you can see the end of the year totals on either whether we're ahead or behind in those. You keep scrolling down, we're into the police department now. The police department is typically not something that is revenue neutral, because you don't really generate a lot of revenue in the police department. So you have expense in the police department, but it's very difficult to try to make it revenue neutral. So I just want to be clear that I don't think there's probably any police departments that are revenue neutral, because it's not about generating revenue, it's about protecting the community and law and order and peace of the community. Our code enforcement, that is one area where we do try to make it revenue neutral here. And you can see that we're projecting, and I'm going to highlight this here, we're projecting to bring in about $118,000 of revenue in the code department. And we are looking to spend about $127,000. And again, that's impacted by bringing the code enforcement officer in. And the other thing that people need to realize is and let me put it in this perspective, when people call us and complain about the properties around them, whether it be high grass, abandoned vehicles, those are not things that the town makes money on, and I'm not suggesting that we should. But when you get involved in property maintenance, there's an expense to it, as opposed to being in building permits and inspections where you have the right to charge a charge for the services that you are providing. So we're looking to get very involved in the property maintenance aspect of it to make people feel better about the block that they live on, because we can get ahead of high grass and situations like that, but it's not going to make our department revenue neutral like it has been in the past. So as you can see, we have a little bit of projected deficit there. So when you start going through all the different departments, public works, streets and sidewalks, solid waste collection, parks and recreation, this is where we have all the stuff that we do in park and recreation. I'm highlighting a couple of them. Line 479, you see your Fall Fest, seasonal holiday celebrations, whether we're putting banners up, getting flowers, doing whatever, that's where those expenses are at. Line 483 is a Civil War reenactment. We have some money set aside for movies in the park, line 490. So we're still populating these items. Debt service is basically where we're talking about the amount of debt that we pay for all the street refinancing and buying vehicles. You can see that when people ask about what the $384 debt service charge is on their bill, including what we plan on bringing in debt service, our projected revenue is $469,000, but our expense exceeds the amount of money that we bring in debt service. So we've always said we'd like to get to a point where we can start to bring that debt service charge down, but that debt service is there to pay for the financing that we do to repave streets or buy vehicles, so forth and so on. So we're getting it closer to where we're bringing that number down, but we're not quite there. And last year was a new line item that we brought in, stormwater management, because we have a responsibility under stormwater management to pay for that stuff. So we have revenue for that, but our expense going out is about $7,500 more than what was projected. One of the things I'm noticing here, okay, it is all right. At first I thought the screen wasn't being shared, but I see that it is. Emergency management, just to recap on this is something we got creative about a couple years ago, where we don't put a lot of money into emergency management per se, but having this line item allows us to track whenever we have a big hurricane or a major snowstorm, and if the state declares a state of emergency, then the municipalities are able to get reimbursed through state and federal government FEMA funds, and we can be reimbursed. So we create the expense line items that we need to be able to turn in on a report. So we always keep a minimal amount of money in revenue and expenses in there just to keep a placeholder for that. So when you get down to the bottom of the entire budget, and I'm sorry, the elected body sheet doesn't have the line numbers, but if you look at total revenue, we projected $1,923,156 of revenue to come in last year, is what we projected. We're actually on pace to bring in $2,013,000 of revenue, And we are projecting for next year to have $2,034,761.72 of revenue. So when you look at the $213, $2,013, and then compare that to the $2,034,000, that's essentially to some degree your $25,000 that you realize that benefit under the constant yield increase there. So that's sort of where that $25,000 is showing up there. When you look at our expenses, something that we've always done, we have budgeted for expenses so that if we have to do it, we're prepared. We're not scrambling to some degree. So last year we budgeted $1,921,594 of expenses. We've spent $1,640,325. We basically have spent to date $281,000 less than we projected. We think we're going to end the year at about $1,789,446. And as we've done in the past, we're budgeting robustly so that we can be in a position to provide the services for our residents, additional police officers, additional public works employees, code enforcement. So you see the general fund has a positive right now of $29,416.18. So the general fund is the one where a lot of all the activity takes place. Does any of the elected body have any questions on the general fund before I move over to the proprietary funds? Everybody's good? Okay. And again, Judy and I are going to go back at this again over the next 2 weeks so that there'll be some subtle number changes as we drill down a little bit more. But it's looking good for us to be in a position to once again adopt the budget at the end of June that is balanced. The other significant thing in here about our budget is last year we budgeted a transfer of $100,000 of rainy day funds. We did not have to do that this year. So we're not looking to go into rainy day funds in a worst case scenario as we've tried to project the worst case scenarios. So we're starting to make that curve that we talked about, that we would realize once we started bringing adequate water and sewer into the community, which leads to people wanting to invest in their properties, which helps everybody in the community. So you can look at the numbers and start to see those trend lines materializing as we've talked about over the last couple of years. So when you get into the proprietary funds, those are the water fund and the sewer fund. For the benefit of everyone, because this is recorded, proprietary funds are what you are paying on your sewer and water bill is essentially the driving force behind where these monies come from. And we're not permitted by law to have any general fund expenses as part of a utility bill expense. So in other words, when you're paying your water and sewer bill, it's not paying for police, it's not paying to fix potholes, it's paying to maintain the water operations and the sewer operations. So again, everything is sort of straightforward because we built our new wastewater treatment plant. The maintenance of that is relatively in check. We don't anticipate any new unfunded or surprises there. For your benefit, every year we apply to MDE for what are called operator grants. And the operator grants, for the benefit of the residents, when you pay the state-required Bay Restoration Fund in your utility bill, which we're required to charge you, it's a pass-through from the state, the state collects that money. And in the past, all that money was earmarked for fixing failing water and sewer systems. Well, the state feels they've sort of caught up to that, so now there's portions of the Bay Restoration Funds that are given to communities that have really good operating wastewater treatment plants, and we are one of those. So for the last couple of years, we have qualified for upwards of a $30,000 operational grant, which basically is sort of an attaboy, so to speak, from the MDE, stating that your sewer plant is operating good. This year, they've added a new element to it, of which we have applied for, and that now they used to give you a grant if you just met the minimum. Now they're setting aside additional monies for sewer plants that are actually treating above and beyond what the state would like to see. And again, we qualify for that. So I have no idea what those funds will be, but we did apply for those funds. So the wastewater treatment plant is operating, very well right now, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that it continues to do that. So on the water side, here's all your various expenses of what it costs to keep the water plant up and running. We do have in our budget the concept of building a new public works garage over there at the wastewater treatment plant. That cost is going to be shared by the water fund, the general fund, and the sewer fund, because we're basically going to move our public works building or our location from Dairy Street over to the wastewater treatment plant, because it will then keep the public works in one localized area. It'll be behind a fenced compound, and it's just a better use in protecting the integrity of everything we're doing by having them over there. So the budget will include the construction of a new public works garage over there. So when you get to the bottom of the wastewater treatment plant, we are, Judy, I'm sorry, at the bottom of the water, Judy, if I'm reading this right, we are $161,066 to the positive in the water fund after depreciation is taken out. So, that's a nice chunk of change. Judy and I have to get in there and make sure that we have absolutely everything covered in that. On the sewer side,
How does the depreciation compare to the debt service? Because we changed the budget format, so are we still showing the debt payment in here, or is the depreciation being used to kind of show the debt payment?
The depreciation was in there.
I know the depreciation's in here. What I'm wondering is, do we show the loan payments in here?
Yes, that, all of those payments, Department 50,
Okay,
if you look at all those.
all the debt,
GLs,
okay,
that's
'cause-
all payments.
Okay.
Payments and interest.
okay, okay. Because it's like a cash, so it's sort of basically like cash budget with depreciation. Okay.
that's what I've always done to make
I-
it simple
yeah.
for the residents, to get rid of all that accounting.
I understand, but when I heard
Yeah.
depreciation, I just want to make sure we,
Yeah.
okay, fair enough.
On the sewer side itself, and I was talking a little bit about the sewer plant, but on the sewer side, basically the water and sewer share a lot of the cost, especially in public works and administration. So, and I've said this before, what I mean is when we have somebody doing utility billing, all the cost associated with utility billing is pretty much split 50-50 within the sewer and water. So that's why you see a lot of the expenditures being relatively similar in certain areas, because we have those two funds share that cost. So when you roll down to the bottom of the sewer side, again, if I've read this correctly, Judy, on line 225, we're to the positive $7,766 on that.
That's correct. But Dave, back to your question, I really didn't want to get off this without explaining something. The debt service is only for the general fund.
Right,
So there's not any expense that's part of water and sewer.
right, because it's capital,
Yes,
yeah, so it being as capital, so if we're not showing the payments of the debt service, then your depreciation effectively counteracts your cash
Yes.
flow of your payments.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, the other thing is. that
More or
we're
less,
doing-
it's not a perfect match.
Right.
Because your interest is an expense,
What's that?
but I said your interest is an expense,
Yes.
but your paying down of your principal payment
Yeah.
is just a transfer from your assets to your.
Right. Now,
to your debt.
let me just say this. When you look, I said the water fund has a positive of 166,000 in change, but the sewer side is much lower. It's because we're not paying the principal yet on the Chester water line. We're only paying interest only on that, because we've not closed on the Chester water line yet, that financing, because we're not done utilizing all that financing. So that's why
Are we
there's a big
depreciating it yet?
discrepancy between,
no, it's not being
We're not
depreciated.
depreciating it then either.
but you have depreciation of all the other assets that
Right,
are
right, right.
charged
Well,
to
understand.
the
Like
the
the
water
sewer plant's
side.
being depreciated, it's just the water line's not.
Yes, yeah,
But when we're paying the principal on the sewer plant.
yes.
Okay.
That's why the sewer plant bottom line is a
Yeah.
lot lower, because we're paying a hefty principal payment
Yeah.
on the loan.
But
on that.
the depreciation, kind of, more or less, is about the same as your principal payment, give or take, it's
Yeah.
it's roughly the same.
Yes.
It's not perfect, but
Does anybody have any questions on the water or the sewer?
so it's an accrual budget, not a cash budget.
Yeah. Now, there are some Gatsby changes that are gonna be coming down the road. That, I'm gonna have to, Judy's more ahead of it than I am because it's her world, but we have to make sure that we're incorporating them on the general fund side. That's why you might see some changes in the next, budget numbers there. But the good thing is, we have flexibility within our budget. If we have something we have to add, we have flexibility in our budget to get creative, to still come out, in the positive at the end of it. So is there any items that we've missed in terms that you guys think that we should be, addressing?
Well, if we go over it, at home and find something, we can email you
Yeah.
and say, look, this is what the question is, or
Yeah,
is this amount correct?
yeah,
The only
Yeah,
thing
absolutely.
the only thing I saw was, there's a lot of things that we spent less money on this year due to COVID, right? There was one thing in particular was, let me see.
Like at Sunfest, we didn't spend money.
Yeah, there were, and so the amounts were lower, right? And so we adjusted the budget down for those. to-
which line items are you talking about?
I gotta find it. It kind of jumped. I thought about it after give me a second. I saw the number down and then I thought about it and I'm like, wait a minute. There's a reason that went down.
Do you remember which department? Was it in
I
40?
think it was in Parks and Rec.
Okay.
Yeah, like Fall Fest, for example, those kind of budget items, the money that we spent on some of these things was significantly lower because we didn't, Civil War reenactment was zero, so we budgeted zero. So we budgeted zero for the Civil War reenactment. We're planning on having
Right.
one this year.
Right,
Right,
so
so-
those are the examples where Judy and I really have to continue to get into the weeds
Yeah.
to figure some of this stuff out.
Dave, I'll put asterisks beside those.
Yeah, I mean, Sunfest, yeah, because at first it didn't click, and then we went through it, and then I was like, wait a
Well,
minute, after.
let me say this to you though, with the Sunfest, by the nature of how Sunfest happens, it's late in the budget cycle. So
Yeah.
we're not really even showing the expense
Yeah.
in year-to-date so
Yeah.
far, because we haven't processed all those expenses that we
Gotcha.
just did this past weekend.
So like the Fall Fest and the,
Winterfest.
winter extravaganza and those kinds of things, like those numbers are low.
Well,
Also
let me
possible.
let me add one thing to that.
Okay.
In our general admin, we have a lot of mayor expenses or line item for that. We have miscellaneous expenses.
Okay.
Some of
I-
those charges that we did, in other words, we exceeded those items because, for instance, although we did not do Fall Fest, we still went out and bought all the pumpkins and made it so people could come up and grab them. That wasn't necessarily charged to Fall Fest because the idea is we didn't have Fall Fest. So the numbers of what was actually spent might look depressed in those line items, but they're actually showing up in general admin. And what I did was we recognized that, and instead of saying we spent this amount of money in miscellaneous, I lowered that number with the intent of moving it back into
Yeah.
Fall Fest in there, and so that's an example of some more fine tuning we have to do.
Right.
There. It's been interesting,
Yeah.
the whole COVID experience has been interesting, as I'm sure it's been for everybody.
And Calvin, one of the things that I just wanted to add was with the pumpkins that we had a farmer actually grow them for Spooktacular. So that's why we ended up purchasing them and did a pumpkin giveaway, because we didn't want to leave her empty-handed after we had, committed to buying these pumpkins for Spooktacular, and then COVID happened. So
So please, by all means, take a look at it, and over the next week
Yeah.
or so, send us anything that you see as an anomaly. I mean, I'll just close, with this. As we know, and Judy and I have had a lot of conversations because it's been, first of all, I want to thank Judy for everything she's doing on the financial end, because she's, to some degree, she's blending what her life experiences have been with not only some anomalies that occur in municipal government, but I know that our budget is a little bit more into the weeds because we don't have the cushion that other communities have. Another community could make a $50,000 mistake in something, but if they're already expecting to put $500,000 into the reserve fund, $50,000 isn't that big a deal. Whereas you guys know, especially Augie and Dave that have been on the board for a while, we're showing a $29,000 surplus. We've had $1,400 surpluses.
Really?
Yeah.
So in order to protect ourselves from that, that's why we get into such intricate detail so that we don't inadvertently make a collection of mistakes because we blend it all into one thing. So our budget is broken down into a lot of finite detail. And as we start to turn the curve economically, we can probably start to back off that to some degree. But I can also tell you, and I don't want to speak for Judy, but I know me personally over the years, that is what has put me in a position to be able to answer the questions that you guys have because, in my case, in years past, I've had to study all these line items and understand them. And it's great to have a second set of eyes getting involved in that, and I'm sure it's helping her learning curve also to have a better understanding of how our budget is really made up. So thank you for being patient, because I know it's a lot of detail, but there is a reason for it.
all right, moving into citizens input. Would anyone like to speak this evening?
I'm just going to make sure, Mayor, I'm not seeing anybody in the waiting room, so whoever we have here is who we have.
All right, Chief, your report.
Chief, give me 1 second and I'll bring that up for you.
Okay.
I know it's just your hourly report, but
The biweekly event report.
yes, it's up on the screen now.
Okay. As you see, the biweekly report for the calls for service generated by the police department. During that period, we did have a stolen auto along Main Street. And the very next day, we discovered a second attempted stolen auto one was on West Main and one was on East Main. We anticipate arresting the individual who is from Delaware sometime today or tomorrow. We were able to get some breaks in that case quickly and get some closure to it. But with that being said, I should remind everyone to lock your vehicles. If you park in a dark place and you leave your vehicles unlocked, you give an opportunist thief a good area of cover to be in your vehicle for a long period of time and cause damage by trying to hotwire it or steal something in it. So make sure you lock your vehicles. And yes, it's something that we probably aren't accustomed to here in Rising Sun, but times are changing, and we're not immune from transient criminals. The officers have began their annual in-service training. Some of you may know that we are required currently to have 18 hours of training with several mandated subjects, and the officers in the process of doing that. And we also have to have numerous hours of firearms training. Today is one of those days with the officers out on the firing range and getting those hours in. And last,
Oops.
You froze up,
This-
Chief.
I'm sorry.
You froze up for about 10 seconds.
Okay. With Sunfest, it was a great time this year. Glad to see people out and about. It was very well attended. We had 6 calls for service at the event itself, 2 found properties, 2 injured subjects, 1 animal complaint where a vendor did not provide water and shelter for his animal, and a protective order violation. All of those were handled with most people not even know that we had to engage people in the crowd. Beyond that, it was a very good event, and I think many people enjoyed it. And that concludes my report, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you, Chief. Town Administrator, your report?
Yes, I have a couple things that I want to, I want to revisit the paving to again assure everyone in the Valley View development that the project is not being ignored. We do have the project out to bid. We expect to open those bids on June 23rd and then be able to award those bids with the expectation of the contractor starting as quickly as possible. The only caveat is if there's any delays in the supply pipeline for the construction industry. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that that's not going to be an issue. The other areas that we are looking to pave are Mason Run and Turtleback Court. Turtleback. When we originally did the Summer Hill development, Turtleback was viewed as not being that bad, so we did not pave it. Everything else below Turtleback was paved before. Some of the areas are still holding up, but some of them are not. So some streets in Summer Hill are part of the paving list. The other one is Mount Street. Anyone who's gone down Mount Street towards the dog park sees that separation in the road down there. We've tried to fill it in the past, but you know it's time to just pave, do a curb-to-curb pave in those areas. This work does include replacing sidewalks in many of the areas. And it does have some contingency built into it, which would allow us to sort of add some things if necessary as we get into it. The other thing I wanted to remind everybody, because we advertise for Habitat for Humanity had submitted an application to get a variance to build or place a new house at, down on Walnut Street, Lot 6, which is at the corner of, I believe, Meadowside and Walnut Street, down by Jane's Methodist Church. They had submitted a variance to put a house that was 144 square feet smaller than what was permitted. We advertised for this hearing. We handed out a handful of public notices, and then the same day, Habitat for Humanity came back and said they were not going to request the variance. They're going to build a house that complies with the code. So I just wanted to be very clear that despite what showed up in the newspaper and a handful of handouts, there will be no planning commission or Board of Appeals meeting for Habitat for Humanity's home because they have now complied with the minimum square footage. So I wanted to take another opportunity to get that out to the public. We have done a door-to-door notice to all the properties down there, I believe within 500 feet, 250, 500 feet, I don't recall what it is. We did hang door notices down there letting people know that there's no longer a need for the meeting. The other thing I wanted to let the elected body know, and even the general public, the Stevens Homes track over or off of that runs behind Mount Street off of Meadowside, down where it dead ends near the apartments. A builder has expressed an interest in that property and has talked about picking up the development of the residential homes down there. We've not been giving anything yet. I've just been answering questions from that builder. In addition, I think it's important to get this out here also, that in the Maple Heights development, we have been notified by the developer, Montgomery Brothers, that it is his intent to finish, I believe, the roughly 57 remaining building lots down there. So he notified me in writing that that's what his intent is to do. So at this point, we're just waiting for them to submit plans to go back before the Planning Commission. So I wanted to let everybody know that that is pending based upon the developer. The other thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned, because sometimes we miss it on the backside of the agenda, is that there are very few days during the year where the trash hauler will change the pickup delivery because of a holiday. Memorial Day was one of those, and Independence Day is one of those. So Independence Day is on Sunday this year. The holiday is typically celebrated on the Monday, so that means the trash collection for the following Friday is going to be moved to the following Saturday. So I'm not sure what that date is off the top of my head, but the trash collection after Independence Day will occur on Saturday and not Friday. And that concludes my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Town Administrator. Did you have a question, Commissioner Warren?
No, I just said thank you. Yeah, Travis, you muted yourself.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, my report's pretty brief. I did want to say a huge thank you to town staff, to our Public Works, Police Department, to Chief Peterson, to all of the commissioners that came out to support Sunfest. I also want to thank the Rising Sun Chamber of Commerce and Ben Salmon for all he did for the event as well. A huge thank you to Ramsey Ford, who provided the vehicles for the board and myself to ride in. Our Conman has graciously done that every year, and this year was no different. So a huge thank you to Ramsey Ford for doing that. I also wanted to say, many of you have seen that the senior banners are going up. They started going up today, and they will be finishing up until next Monday, placing them throughout our community. We are a small community. There is a large graduating class, a little over 270 kids, I believe, and there are 8 kids on each banner. But we are excited that we were able to do that again this year. It was a huge crowdfunding campaign that was done, and the community really came together to raise funds for it. So I think they turned out excellent, and people should be able to enjoy them the next couple of months. At the end, they will be turned back over to the high school, and the high school will decide what's best to do with them. I also wanted to thank everyone, different community leaders that came out to Sunfest. I also attended the Rising Sun High School class of 2021 graduation. It was a great event. Sincere congratulations to all the graduates, including my adopted son, Mason Bernardo, as well as Commissioner Warnick's daughter, Maddie. Huge congratulations to all of them. They went through such a challenge this year, and they were able to overcome it and have a almost normal graduation. That concludes my report. Commissioner's comment. Commissioner Braun.
I have no report.
Commissioner Pearson.
No report.
Commissioner Warnick.
I'll just go to the report.
All right. So upcoming, hold on a second, an upcoming town meeting, June 22nd is our next town meeting, followed by July 8th. The Maryland Municipal Conference is June 27th through the 29th. You can see the upcoming holidays, Independence Day, as well as various trash, recycling, and yard waste schedules. Is there anything else to come before the board this evening?
Mayor, the only thing I would add is that the town attorney is on. I'm not sure if he has any report.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. We've been busy doing things with the steering committee and trying to work with the county on some of our issues that we've been facing regarding the annexation and the Southern States project. And as you know, you've tasked me with dealing with that. I think we're making good progress, and I'll give you a more detailed report as things get a little bit more concrete. So that's my report. And then the only other issue that I had is, I believe the mayor was giving the next dates, and did you say July 8th? Because I think that's a Thursday.
Yeah, that's a Thursday.
Or did you say
Yeah.
July 6th?
Yeah, it should be.
I was wrong.
It should be July 6th, you're correct. And it says on the 8th on the agenda, but it should be the 8th.
It says 8th on the agenda, it's supposed to be 6th.
Oh, it's
You're
the
correct.
first one?
All right. I got it.
It's gotta be the 13th. This is
I'm sorry, the 13th, yes, I'm sorry. It would be,
Is there any more?
the 6th would be,
Before the board this evening?
correct. That'd be it, thank you.
Could I get
Motion.
a motion to adjourn the meeting?
July 13th is
Oh, is this-
So moved.
second.
It's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned.